Get ready for your mind to be blown. Today on the podcast, I had Dan Walters. Dan is an incredible real estate investor that got started in the last crash. He does a majority of his deals in Idaho, but now he's also into note investing and just a creative finance savant. So I can't wait for you guys to listen to this episode. I know you're going to get a ton out of this because I sure did. When I had my first due on sale clause called on a subject to property, Dan was the first person I called. So you won't want to miss this episode. Make sure to give a 5-star review if you got value from this and subscribe. Enjoy. Welcome to the Real Freedom Podcast with your host, Ryan Weimer. Today, I've got Dan Walters with me. Dan, how are you?
Wonderful, my man.
All right. So he's just an incredible creative finance expert, Idaho native. Dan, how did we meet? We met a while ago.
We did. We actually, an agent, Corby, I think I ended up wholesaling a deal
That's
through
right.
you. I think when you were may have been still in California.
Yes.
And it was on somewhere in Meridian. I can't remember the street of it now, but yeah, it was in Meridian. And that's where I got introduced to you through Corby. We hadn't actually meet physically, but I think we exchanged some emails and things like that at that point. But yeah, that was probably 16, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
16.
Yeah.
17?
So guys, if you're a creative finance nerd, this episode is for you because Dan is under the radar. Is that fair to say?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
On purpose.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that's intentional.
Okay. But we just had our first due on sale clause called this year, and Dan was the first person I called. And so if you are learning creative finance right now, hopefully we can get into some of those like really nitty gritty questions that nobody talks about for whatever reason, or that are kind of.
Yeah, those are fun. I mean, it is the soup du jour.
Yeah,
As
exactly.
they say in the market right now. So
Exactly. So Dan, on this podcast, we like to start out gunning right out of the gate. So what is your biggest failure?
my biggest failure, I think, was when I very first got started. So we started, my partner and I at the time, we started right in 09.
Okay.
So it was prime real estate when the market was just landsliding.
No kidding. So before the landslide or after the landslide?
It was the quote unquote crash.
Yep.
And then we really our market didn't hit bottom till 11. So we were still, so we partnered up and then we were like, hey, let's just go do this thing. And so with my partner, he had a lot of construction background. I had basically a mom that was in real estate for years. So I was around real estate. So I knew real estate, I thought. So it went out of sheer ignorance and arrogance, right? But anyway, we stepped in and so we were flipping houses in a landsliding market where we were buying houses 1 month. And then about 3 months later, as we were wrapping up, the house was worth about what we paid for it 3 months prior, kind of a thing. So we did that. And then we had some connections down in Arizona in the Phoenix market. So we decided, well, let's go buy some houses in Phoenix too. So we were doing that. And anyway, needless to say, we went that route for about 12 months or so. And when we got done with it, we had done probably anywhere between, I can't remember now, but it was somewhere between like 30 to 35 properties in like 12 to 18 months, something like that. We got about a net zero that we had made.
Which is impressive given the circumstances.
Given the circumstances, right? So we had some huge losses on, then we'd come back and get a big win, but we just kept doing this teeter-totter.
Wow.
And we were just running and gunning. But so you could call it a failure, but what it was for us was, at the end of that period, we realized that this cannot be sustainable.
Yeah.
So it was those failures and just that learning experience. That was, I think, one of our biggest. And then we stepped into some education. We started getting very clear on what our path was, what our niche was, and how we wanted to move forward without having to go with this teeter-totter of results.
Okay.
Because I think if we kept going that way, burned out, probably been divorced, not married, lost.
I was just about to say,
all kinds of things.
For you to get started in 2009, I mean, and yeah, Boise didn't, hit bottom until 2011. What made you want to get started? Like, what were you doing before?
I was pretty fortunate. Both of my parents were entrepreneurs. They were business owners, small business owners. My mom was a owner-operator of a restaurant, bar and grill for a long time. My dad was a crop duster. And then my mom retired from the restaurant and bar business and then got into real estate and then did that for a long time. So I just watched them. By the time I was 9, I was working with my dad during the summers, loading airplanes, mixing chemicals, running ground crews, doing all that kind of stuff. So when I graduated from college, I thought I was going to go step in and be a teacher. I was still trying to figure some things out. So I was like, yeah, I'll just go be a teacher. I'll go coach. I'll go do some things as I wrapped up my college career. And then I realized that I couldn't be a W-2 employee. I just couldn't do it. I didn't fit.
Well, it wasn't in your blood. Yeah.
Yeah. It was ingrained in me. And then once I kind of went out and tested that for about 12 to 18 months, I realized, I just need to go go do this thing. And I just jumped in, and that's just happened to be '09 when that happened. And
Really?
yeah.
Okay. So it wasn't like, hey, I've been looking at this for a few years and the market just crashed. This is my time to get in. It was
it
purely
was just
chance.
like, you know what? I need to go do my own thing. I don't really know what that is. I got a comfort level of basic understanding of how real estate works after watching my mom do it for years. I mean, she did it on the retail side. She didn't do so much on the investment side, but she did it on the retail side. And I knew I didn't want to do that, but I did go get my license. I had my license for about a year. I was just like, yeah, I'm not cut out for this either.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna drive around and show people properties and buy. It just wasn't. I didn't have the patience for it. So anyway, yeah, that's kind of how it all panned out.
Okay. So you did that for about 12 to 18 months and you had a reset. Is that safe to say?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's in any iteration of business, right? You come to the end of the year and you reflect, right? And we were just kind of going with blinders on. And I think kind of what I think you always talk about is just taking action, right? What we always talk about in this space is, you know, if you can do 5 deals, I mean, you're like in the top 2%.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
The bar is so low, guys.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. So I mean, you can call it a failure, you can call it success, whatever. You know, have we lost money on specific deals? Yeah. Yeah, we have. But I don't look at those as failures. I just like, okay, that was a lesson learned in this one little thing because we missed 1 or 2 items, as you well know, and doing deals you guys do. I mean, it's not the same thing every single time. It's something new that pops up. You're like, oh, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah. So you have this reset, and then that gives you probably some clarity. And I think this is what's so key for the listeners to really take away from this is like, you could argue that you got in at the worst possible time, right?
Yeah.
Or if not the worst possible, very close to it. And yet, without that kind of experience, it doesn't award you the possibility to step back and like assess your failure and where do I go from here, right? If it was a normal market, you could have just been going on for many, many years. And these 1 or 2 things that come up, you're learning, you're making mistakes, but the market is still appreciating. It's more forgiving. And then you're not really ever awarded that chance to stop and think, do I really want this or not?
Yeah. And I look at it now. So in that 1 year, yeah, it felt like we can't get a break. But at the same time, because we were just operating off of ignorance and probably more arrogance than ignorance. And because we're just utilizing this quote unquote experience that we had in connection, because like I said, my partner had all the construction background. So we were getting a lot of stuff done for relatively cheap labor. And thank God we did, because had we been paying for more, I mean, it would have been a lot worse. But at that point in time, yeah, it was frustrating. But then to come to the end of it, and when we started reassessing, we realized that how great the opportunity really was. I mean, we're grateful for the process because, like, yeah, to your comment about being in a normal market, if we were in a normal market, we probably would have kept the spin in the wheel.
Yep.
Right. And just kind of and constantly been in that hamster wheel for who knows how long.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were able to really pivot in a very unique time probably in the history of real estate, with where we were, the market we were in, the timing of everything. It was literally like what one of our mentors said. It was the perfect storm of opportunity, because we hadn't seen that opportunity in probably 40, 50 years. And we probably won't see an opportunity like that for another 40 or 50 years.
Yeah. So you go through this failure, or as we like to say, just lessons learned, right? Yeah. Because you took the action. And so what was then the catalyst to like start the next thing?
Well, I think we realized when we looked at our P&L, it was like, well, I mean,
we didn't
make anything, and we busted our ass, you know? I mean, we were sitting there working hard and running all over the place and just realizing like we don't really have anything to show for it at the end of the day. We didn't have any assets. We didn't have any cash to really speak of. So it's like, well, one of these things has to change. In real estate, there's ebbs and flows of being, you know, cash rich and paper poor, or paper rich and cash poor, and then everywhere in between, right? And so we didn't have either one of those. And so it was like, you know, we need to really pivot back down and see and make sure as a partnership, we're on the same page of what we really want to build here. Yeah. Versus like just continuing to stay in the wheel. So after a conversation, we're sitting here flipping houses, and we realized we really want cash flow. That's what we wanted. So why in the hell are we flipping houses if we're trying to build a cash flow business? So then we spent some time, we sought out some mentors that were specializing in that. And then we found one, locked into that, and then we completely bought in 100%. I mean, we actually there was a lot of opportunities that we passed on outside of the scope. I mean, had we bought them, it would have been very significant in our wealth change. But at the same time, we thought it was a distraction off of the path that we were trying to build. So anyway, it was getting very clear, very focused. And then the uniqueness of the partnership, which you probably experience this too, where you've got one, you see this opportunity over here, and you're like, hey, we should do this. And you have the other one go, nope, that's not what we do. And just kind of pull you back in and keep you back on the path. And so there was a lot of that.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because as an entrepreneur, and the longer you do this, it is a skill to say no.
Yeah.
It's not just like say no to that. It's literally a skill to stop and think and say, is this really going to get me closer to my end destination or to whatever my goal is, or is it a distraction? And it's not always obvious. So if you have another person like that to help you refocus, or join a mastermind, or have a coach or something that can help you like find that clarity and stay in that tunnel vision, you get way further along, right?
Yeah.
I've been caught in that trap many times where I said yes to way too many things, and most of them didn't go well.
Yeah. It keeps you grounded more than anything else. And like you said, however you want to define a partnership, right? It's a source of accountability.
Yeah.
Right. It's a source of accountability to keep you on the path of what you declared that you wanted to accomplish and achieve. And that path is not always a straight line. I mean, it's never a straight line, especially in this game. But to have somebody there say, hey, that's not what you said you were trying to do.
Yeah.
You're right.
100%.
Or it's like, hey, have you done this thing yet? Well, no, because I was looking at this thing over here, and because it sounds like I can probably quadruple what I was going to do. Yeah, but you spent the last 3 or 6 months just building this thing here. You want to go chase that now, and you haven't even gotten any results over here yet.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Back here.
Alex Hormozy calls that the woman in the red dress from The Matrix, right?
Yeah.
And then like at each level, the woman in the red dress becomes more attractive and more seductive, because now instead of, it's $100,000 opportunity, it's $1 million opportunity, 10 million, right? And you keep having to say no, it becomes exponentially harder. Plus your network expands as your experience grows, right? And so I know we'll get into that a little later once we complete this cycle of your growth and everything that you've done. But it sounds like that's now brought you to a place of where, hey, do I really want all this stuff? Let me really hone in on what I want to do.
Yeah. And I think, where I'm entering this time in my life where it's focusing on, okay, how is this thing that I've built? It's great. It's provided a great lifestyle, but at the same time, it's time for a new iteration. It's just new growth. It's a new invention. It's a new creation. And so sometimes it creates more stimulation for me mentally where you want to go. And the beauty of it is, which I think is even cooler about this game that we play here in real estate, is that there's so many different niches. I mean, there's millions.
So many.
There's millions of ways. Like the old saying that I was hang on to that I heard a long time ago was, the great thing about real estate is there's a million ways to make money, but the bad thing about real estate is there's a million ways to make money. The good thing about it is like once you've done something for so long and you've got the system built and the structure built and everything else, but you've done it for a while. I mean, to pivot into a new niche, it's not that hard because all the concepts and the widgets are the same. It's just the functionality of it's just a little bit different. So It's not like you have to reinvent yourself completely, but there's a ways to make yourself as active or as passive as you want. And as kind of getting this different aspect of my life, it's like, man, do I want to be more passive? I mean, I don't know. But that's the beauty of it.
Yeah. And I think you and I were talking pre-show, there's seasons to all this, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're looking for cash flow, and did you cut the Phoenix thing at the time and just go all in on Idaho?
We did.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, we did. And at the time, I mean, it was all like late 2009, all the way through probably 12. It started shrinking up, but at least till the end of 11. I mean, there was just REOs sitting on the sidewalk. You're literally tripping over them everywhere you went.
Really?
And so, we didn't have to really market outside of it. Everything we bought was off MLS.
Okay.
It was either MLS or trustee sales, one of the two. And I mean, we're sitting here. It's crazy, man. Like to even think about it today, we were buying houses for $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 that were 5 years old.
Renting for
$900,000.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
how are you funding them?
We had private money,
Okay.
people. We just had private money that people we were introduced to, our network that we had connected with. When you get to that phase of it, I think if I look at it now, like one of the biggest failures is not buying hundreds of, if not thousands of those properties. Because at the time we were so focused on picking up properties, but we were so focused on getting a certain percentage rate. Like, oh man, if we had to pay 10%, like, whoa, like our butts were puckered. And I'm sitting here thinking now, we've had conversations going like, man, if we could have gone and paid 20% on money just to go pick up, if that would allowed us to pick up another 15, 20, 30 properties at $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, those houses today are $350,000 to $400,000.
Let's talk about that actually, because I want to get your crystal ball here on what's happened in the real estate market, because most people that have gotten in post-crash right now feels like interest rates are really high. We're hitting an affordability ceiling. There's likely going to be growth, but how much, nobody knows. There's also people that are saying there's no inventory. Prices are going to skyrocket if interest rates come down. If I can get money at 10, 12, 15%, where do you draw the line there? Or where do you see in your crystal ball for where things are headed?
It all depends on your niche. It all depends on your strategy. I mean, at the end of the day, people that are looking for cash flow properties, I mean, Boise might not be the best market to be buying in for cash flow at the moment.
Right.
But if you have the wherewithal, and look, I'm not saying this as a strategy, but if you're just fixated, I'm gonna need to buy in the Treasure Valley or I need to buy in Boise. All right. Well, I mean, if I can find a solid deal where maybe it breaks even and it truly breaks even, not like it just breaks even and you don't count your expenses, all that kind of stuff, right?
Classic.
Yeah. But where it breaks even and over time, appreciation is going to happen. You're going to build some equity and rates will eventually come down at some point. If you can sustain that and then refinance it or whatever it is at that point to get a lower rate then it does start. It really all just depends. It really does. Are we talking short term? Are we talking long term? Are you doing fix and flip strategy? Are you doing cash flow strategy? Where's your basis on this? Because that whole conversation is completely different with one versus the other.
And I think that comes back to there's a million ways to make money in real estate. And so you have to be crystal clear on what am I trying to achieve? And for most people, this is usually what I ask them is, do you hate your job? Like, do you hate your day job? Because if you do, and your goal is to quit your day job as quick as possible, then you need to either go seek cash flow or do wholesaling, right? Because it's the quick money, right? And that'll get you out of the job. And then you can start looking towards bigger thing and defining your goals. If you like your job, it gives you more freedom because you have a longer time horizon and you can do different things, right? Yeah.
Like for those that are going to stay in their W-2 job or whatever it may be, it's like, look, are you trying to build wealth or are you just trying to build some additional income to your lifestyle?
Right.
If it's building wealth, then, I mean, man, if you can go acquire 4 properties a year for the next 10 years, when you get all said and done, you have 40 properties that are probably nearly paid off and you can just roll that cash flow back into those things. I mean, you're going to have a huge amount of wealth in the next 10 years if you have that patience and if that's where you're going to sustain. I just need to replace my W-2 income so I can get going. Okay, well, that's what's interesting about getting into the conversation with people that are trying to get started. It's like, well, how much you want to make? Well, I want to make like 40 grand a month. Well, how much you making now? Well, 3.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so once you go focus on like doing one wholesale deal that nets you 10, that gives you some runway.
100%. Yeah.
Right?
Expectation setting with yourself.
Yeah. That's where it gets frustrating in the social media space, which I understand because it's branding and it's marketing and it's just what you got to do. But I feel like people get caught up in, hey, I'm watching Ryan and doing all these huge deals and this great stuff. And I'm seeing his posts. They're doing 6-figure deals or doing all this stuff. I'm like, man, if I can just do one of those, that'd be great. But man, and you get wrapped up in stuff. But if I can just go do a deal and make like 5 or 6 grand, that's 2 months of income.
100%.
Or if I can go do one wholesale deal and make 10 grand, man, that would be life-changing.
Yeah.
And if I could do 3 or 4 of those a year, an extra, like what does an extra $40,000 in your bank account do while you're still doing your W-2 job?
Dude, I love that we're talking about this because I actually learned about wholesaling from buying that deal from you. I didn't even know what it was, right? And so it's like, oh, a signing, like what is that? And so I had a W-2 job as an engineer. And so I think that was me and my buddy Corey's second rental property. We bought it 50-50. And so we were still buying properties on market, or that was our first like on market experience of, oh, this is what wholesaling is and what's going on here. And then like from there, it took me about a year researching, I'll just call it analysis paralysis,
Right.
Probably more than a year, honestly, looking back. And then it took me 8 months after that of cold calling about 10 hours a week to get my first wholesale deal.
That's great.
But I say that because I still remember where I was in the office, in the engineering office when that first wholesale deal closed. It was $11,000. And dude, my brain chemistry changed forever. It could have been $1. It could have been $100. It didn't matter. It was proof of concept I could make money outside of my W-2 job.
Yeah.
And that is the win. It's not, I need to go make $40,000 per month or else this doesn't work or I'm a failure or whatever. No, it's like proof of concept that you can make money outside of your W-2 job. It doesn't matter how little or big it is.
Yeah. I mean, the hardest deal is your first deal.
100%. Yeah.
It's definitely that. And then once you do a couple more deals and you realize, once you get to 100, like, oh, I really don't know much about real estate.
Yeah.
Doing your first deal is the hardest. And once you get over that, the expansion of the mind, of the possibilities, it turns into a blue ocean, because there's something very liberating and very freeing about it. Like, oh, if I can just do that again and again and again, what would that look like?
So when you're buying properties this cheap, and I'm guessing it's 2011 and on, what was your blue ocean moment where you're like?
Well, at the time, for us, because again, we were buying to accumulate, right?
Yep.
And so it did have its challenges, but what we didn't realize was the magnitude of the moment. We knew there was a tight window there of being able to utilize this, but at the same time, there was still a lot of mental mind blocks from a scaling standpoint, because there were just two of us. But at the same time, there was a lot of things going on, but we just knew we had to acquire as much as we could. And so there were some self-limitations in our thought process, because again, like part of it around raising money was a big part of it, because we didn't raise nearly enough as we should. But again, in the market that we were in, again, just coming off the crash and how the real estate was. So the last thing people wanted to do was invest in real estate. So that was a challenge in and of itself. But we saw just that, like how exciting it was to buy this asset that was literally built in 2006. It had sold for like $240,000 like a year prior, or like in 2006. And we're sitting here buying it for $50,000. I mean, we hadn't seen those prices since like the 1970s.
That's insane.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was the moment. Holy cow. Like, this is crazy. And a part of the group that we were a part of, the mastermind group, there was a guy, he'd been in there. He was involved in a previous crash. He'd been in the business for probably 20 plus years or so. And he goes, this is it. Like, I'll never see one of these in my lifetime again. So it was seeing the feedback from those people that had seen 2 or 3 cycles, to hear them say, yeah, this is unlike anything we've ever seen. And so that was like, okay, we better go.
Yeah.
We better go.
Yeah, I'll say. Okay, so how long do you do that? And then when do you start seeing appreciation? When does creative finance come into the picture?
So things started really kind of to start trending back up and picking back up probably in 12, right? 12, 13. So like the REOs weren't drying up, but there was more people entering the market and the inventory levels were going down. But anyway, things were starting to pick back up and normalize a little bit. I had been introduced not so much to creative, because I consider like sub 2 one component, and then creative's another.
Yes.
Is another piece of it.
Yep.
So we were introduced to sub 2 pretty much right away, during 09 and 10 through the same mentor that we were working with. But it's just, we didn't need it.
Yeah.
We didn't need it at all, because we were just buying everything off the street. So really about in 12 and 13 is where we started implementing the sub 2.
Okay.
That's really just started to become pretty prevalent then. So we started just doing a lot of sub 2 stuff. And then really creative didn't really become a huge piece until probably like 18, 19.
Okay.
For us. And then I stepped into another mentorship, another program, a guy you and I are familiar with, but stepped into that and just got my mind blown into like true creative. I mean, there's some stuff that's being talked about right now about, like 0% interest stuff. That's all good and great, but man, there's about 50 layers deep of possibilities there.
So give me, what's something in the last couple of years that's blown your mind that's kind of been a new revelation?
As far as like a deal structure, or like, what do you mean?
Just in creative in general, in the Rubik's Cube that is creative finance.
Well, as far as like a technique.
Yeah.
You and I have talked about a little bit when you do a seller finance deal and being able to buy your own note back. I had no idea what that even was. And it took about 5 or 6 times of like having somebody explain it to me what that really meant and the power of it. And I was like, okay, that sounds cool.
Yeah. So what's the language that somebody needs to include in their
there's a long sentence of it. Basically, it's a first right of refusal clause to buy back your own note if and when they get an offer from a note buying company.
Yeah.
You have a first right of refusal to match it, whatever it may be. That was huge. And actually, I had a conversation about a week and a half ago with somebody here in the market. They had an opportunity to do that, and they didn't.
Same here. Actually, we did implement it because of a conversation that we had a while ago. I just had a seller last week call me and say, I need money now. I sold you this. It was, by the way, 0% interest seller finance note for like $250,000. So we bought the property on seller finance, 0% interest. He owned it free and clear, so it wasn't a sub 2. He calls us and he says, hey, I know your monthly payments are this, but I really need money now because I want to go do this, this, and this. So we didn't pay off the whole thing, but we made a payment at 50 and we literally got double the value. So I think we paid him like 10 grand and got 20K taken off the note.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what the right analogy is here, but like you do the deal once and then the deal keeps feeding you over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this is one of the true like powerful techniques. Getting great terms, crazy terms, like your 0% interest or getting some other components on the front end of it. Those are great. There's a lot of power in what we call baked in terms that you can do that are really there for the duration of the note, whether it's a 5-year or a 30-year agreement that you set up with this seller.
Yeah.
Because over time, these baked in terms are going to favor you and are going to come back to where you're going to be able to basically buy your own note back at a discount or at least get a reduction on that. So the power of this and where the light bulb finally went off for me was an example. It was a case study that was happening and was one of my buddies in California at the time. He bought a property on seller finance. I think I can't remember all the terms of it, but basically it was a $300,000 property. He bought it for like $150,000. He had a $100,000 seller carry note on it. And the guy was just in a bad situation. He ended up buying that note, that $100,000 note for like $7,500.
No way.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to think of a way to explain this to the audience so that they understand this. So let's say you owe $100,000 on a credit card, right? And then tomorrow you call up the bank and you say,
no, it would be like the bank calling you and saying, hey, look, I'll tell you what, we're insolvent, but I'll tell you what, we have a $100,000 note with you. But if you gave us $7,500 today, we'll forgive the note and it'll be paid in full and it'll be in good standing. There won't be anything derogatory on your credit or anything like that. If you give us $7,500 for this $100,000 debt that you owe us, we'll call it good.
So you essentially make $92,500 out of thin air.
Yeah. 100%.
Just because of one little clause that you have in your contract.
Yeah. I mean, the clause certainly helps, but I think the other part of it is, as you well know, when you structure these creative deals with these sellers, the reason why they end up doing it is because they feel like they can trust you.
Yes.
You've built rapport with them. And so they don't even understand what's in the agreement. It's just at that point in time, like they're the ones that have the relationship with you. So when they run into a time where they need some money, they're going to call you first anyway. What it does do is any note buying company that's out there, because if you start structuring wraps or creative notes, you're going to get mailers from companies that are note buying companies and things like that, wanting to buy your note, give you cash today for your note. So it staves off those companies from buying it.
Yeah.
Or at least gives you the opportunity to at least match.
Interesting. Yeah. So the seller could get a mailer of a company that wants to buy their note, right?
Yep.
And cash them out. Mm-hmm. And then you would still be making payments to whatever note company purchases that, right?
Correct.
So let's say we buy a seller finance property. We owe the seller $200,000. A note company could come in and say, hey, we see that this person owes you for $200,000. Why don't we buy this note from you for $110,000? And you can get $110,000 cash in your pocket today. Yes, you'll miss out on $90,000 over time, but here's money in your pocket today.
Right.
Yeah, man, the whole note side of the business is fascinating to me because it's just paper. There's no tenants. There's no properties. You, of course, have security against assets that they're involved in.
Yeah, and going to this new iteration of growth in this business, that's the piece of it. It's more about ease of transaction because that's the thing. Like I haven't bought a ton of paper, but the paper that I have bought, you don't even go to a title company. It's a couple conversations over the phone and it's sending docs back and forth and you're done.
Right.
The simplicity of it is way more. But the other way that I look at it too is you have all the control.
Yep.
I mean, you don't technically own the asset, but at the same time, if there's ever any issue down the line, you have all the say, all the control from a starting point, right? Especially ones that if loans go bad, like you have in that first position, you've got all the control of where it starts and where it goes from there.
He who has the gold makes the rules, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So selfishly, I want to talk a little bit about this first due on sale clause that I had called.
Yeah.
What our conversation was like about that. So we've probably done a few hundred sub-2 deals so far, and almost all of them have been in the state of Idaho. This was the first time I ever got a sub-2 called. The process was a little weird, so I'm going to describe that just for the audience quickly. Is we bought a property sub-2, and 8 to 10 months later, the sellers got a letter in the mail that their note was being called due. Now, why did the sellers get the letter in the mail and not me? Well, because in the loan login, like when you log into their account, sometimes it doesn't let you change either the seller's address or the seller's name in that profile because the loan is in their name, right? And so I think maybe we were able to change the address, but not the name. There's so many weird little nuances here that you figure out when you're doing this. They get a letter in the mail and it's just from an attorney that says, hey, the title's not held in these people's names anymore, and we are calling this due, and you have until this date to pay us in full or else the loan is closing. So I have a couple questions for you about that, because I called you right away and I was like, do I just do a contract for deed? How do I do that? Is it more complicated than that? How many due on sales have you had called?
Up until we've had less than 5.
Okay.
Yeah, less than 5. And they all happened within the last 12 months.
Interesting. Okay. And how many of those did you have to pay off in full?
0.
Okay. Why is that? Because as somebody listening, this is like the boogeyman of creative finance. It's like, what about the due on sale clause? I don't have that kind of money. What happens?
Yeah. So when I learned this strategy, when I learned sub 2, this is what was presented and how it was taught to me.
Okay.
And the very first thing that was said is like, look, anything you do as far as buying this property is going to be in violation of the due on sale clause.
Right.
Okay. If you are doing sub 2, regardless of putting in a land trust, all these techniques that are out there that say this does not trigger the due on sale clause. Like technically, yes, it does.
Right.
Now, so with that being said, what was said is like, look, if you cannot lay your head down at night and go to sleep by the deal that you've structured, or if you're going to be in fear of the due on sale clause, then don't do it. If it's going to keep you up at night,
right,
then don't do it. But the fact of the matter is probably less than 2% of any wrap or any sub 2 deal actually gets called. I mean, that's just, now I think we're just seeing a little bit more of it today just because we had rates at such a low rate from,
Right.
2.5%, 3%, and now they're sitting anywhere between 7 to 7.5%, right? So the banks are incentivized to try and get these loans refinanced into a higher interest rate so they can make more money because they're obviously paying more. So, I mean, just understand that this is just a season of it. But typically speaking, less than 2% get called.
Yeah.
If you cannot like lay your head down at night and sleep good, if it's going to keep you up at night, just don't do it.
Yeah.
It's just like any other real estate deal. How it was taught is like, look, here's one. And if you're trying to offset like the whole negative cash flow thing, right? Well, because I'm going to bet on equity. Okay. Well, if you're going to buy one, would you want 20 of those?
Right.
It's,
Not exactly.
Yeah. Not so much.
Depends.
Yeah. So then why would you buy one if you wouldn't want 20 of them?
Right. How did you handle the 5 that got called?
Yeah. So look, all of these decisions are made by a person. Right. So there is somebody in a department of the lender or the bank, whatever it is. There's a person that's in there that's looking at this and is making a decision based off of what they see. Right. And so really what it comes down to, it's just like anything else. It's just like sales. I mean, you got to call them up. You got to have a conversation and find out exactly what it is that they are seeing and why they're calling it. Because people automatically think once you get that letter, it's automatic, set in stone, and it's done.
Yeah.
So
and the person you call, you can have varying outcomes. You could call the bank 5 times, the lending office 5 times, and get 5 different answers.
Yeah, very true. So what we've realized and understood, and I was taught to do, is like, look, those people make decisions. So pick up the phone, give them a call, have a conversation with them. It's not an adversarial thing; it's a business decision, right? So just approach it like you would in any sales tactic. I mean, you got to build rapport, you got to get under some understanding, and then just gather information, gather data. And then it was just more of like, hey, see that you guys called this loan due. What is it that you guys need to see for you to basically recuse the acceleration? And then they would tell us exactly what they need. And like, okay, how much time will we have to be able to do that? And they give us a time frame. Usually it's anywhere between 30 to 60 to 90 days. Just depends.
Okay.
Right. But it all fluctuates. But the point of the matter is, don't let it be something where it scares you from doing it. That people make decisions, get on the phone, have a conversation, see exactly what it is. And then from that point, then it's just figuring out, okay, how do we do it? And then the other question you have to ask, is it worth the effort and energy that you're going to have to go through to maybe unwind the thing or repaper it in a different way to satisfy the underlying lender?
Right.
Is it worth all of that disruption? Is the juice worth the squeeze?
Yep.
So to speak.
Yeah. So guys, this is why you have to have somebody like Dan in your corner, or be in a mastermind or in a group, or somebody that you can trust. I called the lending company that held this mortgage, and coincidentally, it's one that's calling more due on sale clauses than others.
Yep.
And I called 2 different times. I recorded both of the conversations, which I'm going to share on YouTube for people so they can learn what those conversations are like. But the conversation was pretty much just, hey, yeah, I see there's a note here that the note's been called due, right? This was like a front desk person. They're not the one that issued the letter. A lot of people think I'm going to call in and they're going to be like, Ryan, how dare you? You bought that subject
You broke
to,
the law.
You're going down.
You broke, and realize the due on sale clause is you're not breaking the law. It's not against the law to do
Right.
that. So that's the other thing. That's the other big misconception. I mean, when somebody tells you that what you're doing, if you're trying to buy sub 2, it's against the law, then realize from that point moving forward,
Yes.
don't discuss. If it's a realtor, then that's not a realtor you want to do business with or talk with on this, because they're uninformed.
100%. So when I call in, she puts me on hold because she has to ask somebody, right?
Right.
And I just played dumb and I said, hey, it seems like there's been some confusion here. At Offer Now Idaho, we're looking to hire A players to run our organization and help us grow our business. Corey, why would somebody want to work with Offer Now Idaho?
Do you want to be challenged? Do you want to grow? Do you want to have people in your culture push you to be the best version of yourself? I do. And that's why I'm here. And in addition to that, do you want to have the chance at growing long-term generational wealth? That's all a possibility with a company that's small, cares about you, and wants you to be able to invest in real estate.
What's something that separates Offer Now Idaho from any other real estate company?
It's really rare to find a company that can help you get into a home. Sure, they might throw a few thousand into a 401k that you can access when you're 65. How many people are going to help you either provide a rental property or a shelter over your own head? Through our off-market home buying program, we assist our employees in buying properties once they've achieved certain levels within the company. And that's really unique to people because you get that asset. You get to do whatever you want with it. And you're buying an off-market discounted property to improve the quality of your life and your family's life.
Yeah, not only that, we offer benefits and we have a very challenging and high growth energy startup feel to our work environment. So we are looking for people that want to make over 6 figures a year. Right now, we have a $3,000 referral program. If you know somebody that's looking for a new role, we will pay you $3,000 once that person is hired by us and they hit their 90-day mark. So if you know of anybody that's looking for a new job or looking to change their life, shoot me a DM at RealRyanWeimer on Instagram.
Let's get it.
I got this letter and it says the loan is being foreclosed on. I'm not really sure what's going on here. Can you help me figure out what's going on? I didn't even say, hey, I bought this property subject to, and I got the due on sales clause called. Can you help me? No, I play dumb. So she goes and she talks to somebody and she says, oh yeah, it looks like here we're not showing the deed is in the loan holder's name anymore. And I said, well, that's weird. You know, what do you think we could do to make this go away or just reinstate the loan and keep things as normal? And she said, well, as long as we get something that shows the deed is in the seller's name again, and you send that to this specific email and you reference this loan number, then yeah, your loan will be reinstated and you're good to go. So that's how I know, oh, I need to do a contract for deed it back to the sellers. And then when that loan amount is paid in full, then I get the deed back in my name.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then, again, just a simple conversation.
Yeah.
And just grabbing an understanding of that. Now the assessment becomes, okay, now is this chained to be able to do all this? How difficult or challenging is it going to be? And again, is this underlying mortgage that I have, is it worth doing that? And again, and that's all assessed at that point. But the fact of the matter is you now know what you have to do.
Right.
I guess the lesson in all that would be, I mean, any sub 2, do a contract for deed, right?
Right.
Or land contract.
And the one reason you would maybe not want to do that is if you want the depreciation, because then you technically can't, right? The deed's not in your name, so you can't claim depreciation, but it does de-risk you from that situation altogether, right? And so, like you're saying, the example of, well, would you want 1 negative cash flowing property or 20? It's kind of like, what's your risk tolerance with all this, right? Because if you have 500 sub 2s, 1,000 sub 2s, you better have some significant cash on hand, because you might get one of those lenders on the phone and is like, screw you, I am having a bad day and I just want to make an example out of you. And those conversations might not go that way. Yep. Of the 5 that you had, how many went the contract for deed route, or did you list some or just sell some?
Yeah, I think it was about half and half.
Okay.
Half we sold. One we actually refinanced, and then the other 2 we repapered.
Okay. You know what's interesting is I called in twice on the due on sale. The first time that I called in, because I logged in after I got the letter and I noticed to the loan, and I noticed that they had shut down my ability to make payments.
Yep.
And that's because they can't keep accepting the payments if they want to foreclose, right?
Yeah, there's that. The other piece of that too, because when that happened to us, we tried to make a payment and they said, well, you don't want making a payment from an unknown entity, do you? So that was their
Interesting.
That was their defense. Yeah. But here's the thing. There's levels to this. I think as you get into your larger nationwide lenders, it becomes much less of a issue.
Yes.
When you start looking, as you go down into more regional, state, local banks, most of your local and regional and statewide banks, a lot of them hang on to those loans. Or if they're servicing them, they're pretty tight on that. The smaller the bank, your risk, it probably goes up a little bit more on that. And then on top of that, I think if you couple in probably your FHAs, they probably run versus your conventionals, have a more likelihood of, but again, less than 2%.
Right.
Just kind of keep that in mind. As we're talking about these stories, just keep in mind it's at least less than 2%
right.
of what actually gets called. So
yeah.
Anyway.
And I think that's so key to note is like, just because I see who the loan servicer is and it's a local or regional bank, it does play a little bit of a factor in deciding if I want to do that property as a sub 2, but only because I have all these other ones on the books. And so I need to make sure that I'm managing my risk tolerance. Whereas if I see it's a Chase Bank or a Wells Fargo, I know that it's virtually zero that those will ever get called unless like insurance doesn't get updated or sent in or something.
And so we got a process where it's like, hey, if it's a conventional or it's a larger bank, we can do them this way. If it's a local or state, regional bank and or specific servicers, hey, this is kind of the process we need to follow to make sure.
Yeah.
Right. Just to kind of offset the liability or the chances.
So let's get in the weeds here for a second on sub 2 insurance. Okay. So homeowners insurance, not due on sale clause insurance. Does that exist anymore? I think there was one company that was doing it that was being marketed by someone we know in the space, but is no longer around for obvious reasons. So the proper way when you are closing on a sub 2 to set up homeowners insurance is what?
So what we do, we do it one of two ways. Ultimately, it's all the same, but we'll step in and just keep the existing policy in place, just depending on what the seller's strategy is. Typically, so we'll either just step in and just be added as an additional insured to their current underlying policy for the time being. And then we'll let it season anywhere between 3 to 6 months, whatever it may be. And then at that point, what we will do is we will go and introduce a new policy, which will be a landlord policy still in the seller's name. Our company or entity will be issued as an additional insured on the property.
Yeah. And the reason that you would do that and get an additional policy is just because it's cheaper or?
Yeah, it's cheaper. And sometimes too, when it's the majority of the people that we're buying from, it's their primary residence and they've moved out, and it's typically they have their bundle package with all their autos and all that kind of stuff. And so the rates are all reflected of that. And then when they move out, they change insurance carriers, or it's just a change of policy. So now they're not technically living there anymore. So it needs to become a landlord policy anyway.
Yeah.
Because they're not there. So the likelihood of if something were to happen, would insurance cover it? Kind of a deal.
And the reason you need to be listed as additional insured is?
To protect our interest.
Yeah. Because if something happens to the property, you go to file a claim and you're not on there. Oh.
Well, yeah. I mean, because if there's full damage, right? If there's 100% damage done to the property, we need to be reimbursed for our insured amount. And typically what we do is, let's say we go in and we step in and take over a sub 2 property that has an underlying loan of $100,000, and then we're into it for, let's say, 30 or 40 grand in renovation. But I mean, you can't replace that at 100,000. So our insured amount is going to be well and above that anyway. So we're protecting our interest both ways. So where our renovation costs are covered, plus anything moving forward. If there is full damage, then we have the ability to rebuild.
Love it. So the context here, right, is the number one reason the due on sale clause does get called, or the bank is even triggered to look into it, is because you're not handling this insurance thing correctly. Correct. Because let's say you close on the property, seller calls their insurance and they say, hey, I don't own this property anymore. Please cancel this insurance policy. Well, they're not paying for the loan anymore anyways. We are. Right. We're making the monthly payments. And 99.9% of the time, that insurance and tax payment are in that escrow account payment of your monthly principal and interest payment, right? They're all included together.
Yep.
So if they do that, then the bank will issue a letter and say, hey, you need to provide proof of insurance. And it's just, if you don't maybe get that letter right away, or like stuff can happen and it causes them to look into the file a little more.
Yeah, what we see, it's not so much the force-placed insurance that gets, because that's the other thing too, because if you don't have insurance on it, the lender is going to put force-placed insurance on it, which is going to cost you 3 times the amount.
Right.
Which that's no fun either. But the biggest mistake is if the name doesn't match the name that's on the loan, then that's what can start raising questions. It's not really, hasn't been that big of an issue up until, again, the rates changed.
Right.
As soon as the rates changed, then that becomes more of, I think banks are having more conversations with there's certain departments that oversee this stuff and say, hey, look, if you see this, this might be something to inquire and look into, because, hey, we've got an interest rate sitting here at 3% and we can go lend this thing out at 7.5 right now. That's a 4.5,
So I'm going to ask a little bit of a selfish question, because I know there's somebody in the audience that's going through this right now. So I just closed the property sub 2. I've not touched anything. I've left, the seller's home insurance alone for a couple months to season, or a week, or however long.
Right.
And now I emailed my insurance agent and I say, hey, I'd like to open a new policy, or maybe just get myself added to the existing home insurance that's in place as an additional insured. And they ask me, why? Why do you want to be added?
From the insurance?
Yeah.
Well, do you have a power of attorney? Get a power of attorney. And that erases all those questions.
Okay. And so then I'm emailing my insurance agent and I say, here's my power of attorney. Add me to the insurance as additional insured.
Yep.
And if they ask why, you don't need to know.
Yeah. Look, I'm the power of attorney for, Mrs. Smith.
Yes.
So at this point, we need to have this policy turned into a landlord policy, and we need to add XYZ LLC as the additional insured.
And so the reason we get a power of attorney signed is not only for the insurance, but it's also to be able to contact the mortgage company directly, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. Yes, you need to have it, because you never know when you're going to need it. But more important, you just need to have it just to operate and have those communications with all of those municipalities or all of those lien holders that deal with the property in and of itself. If you don't have that power of attorney, you're kind of you're handcuffing yourself into creating some bigger issues down the road. Now, granted, if you get the online access to the account, that's great.
Right.
And more lenders now you're able to issue payoff quotes through the website now, which is great, and it's making it much easier. But up until probably the last 3 or 4 years, like, you had to call in and you had to request the payoff quote and you had to talk to somebody. And if you're not authorized on the account,
Yeah. So I have another selfish question.
should I be charging you for this?
I love this conversation. I love nerding out. Like, I can
Oh, I
talk
know.
about
This is
this
great
stuff
stuff.
all freaking day. Okay. So I have one of the best deals I've ever done. I have a $100 a month, 0% interest note with a seller until it expires for like $220,000. So it's like over a 200-year note.
Nice.
Yes. But nobody services it right now because he's about it was one of my very first creative finance deals. And so I didn't put in the first right of refusal for the note stuff. And I didn't do everything. I didn't have all the paperwork. Like, I didn't get a POA. I got it later and I have online access, but I don't have that note set up with any kind of servicing company or anything. I take pictures of the checks because he's an older guy. So there's no direct deposits either. I send him a physical check every month. What happens when he dies? Like, do I need to get this note somehow serviced? What if he doesn't cooperate? What happens when he dies?
Well, it's all in all boilerplate agreements.
Right.
I mean, it's going to pass to his heirs and
Yeah.
all that. So, I mean, as long as you have a tight accounting system for that,
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to pass down to whoever inherits his estate,
Okay.
whoever takes that over. So, I mean, nothing. That's the cool thing about it, is this agreement is what it is, and it's going to serve a term, and it translates and moves to your heirs or whoever else takes on the estate. And so at that point, which you're probably going to have a really good chance of buying that note back, because, I mean, those terms that's something I might utilize that. That's pretty dang good, because I think that the terms that you have structured on that, nobody's going to buy that note.
Right.
But if they do, they're going to buy it for pennies.
Right.
I mean, they're literally buy it pennies on the dollar because there's no interest on it.
Right.
And it's such a small payment. Nobody's going to want to buy it anyway.
Yeah.
So you're more than likely going to be buying that note back at a significant discount.
Right.
But yeah, it just passes on to, I mean, as long as your paperwork says that.
Right. And then if one day he passes away and my checks just stop getting cashed, then yeah,
I mean,
weird situation.
Yeah, it is a weird situation. I think just because you may not see anything in the immediate doesn't necessarily mean you won't have any repercussion. I mean, anything coming down the line.
Yeah.
So I would just continue to pay the obligation. And I mean, yeah, I think at that point, if you got 3 to 5 years of nobody cashing your checks, then I mean, it's probably gone to the state.
Right.
You know, if that's the only thing he has. But
yeah, very interesting.
Yeah,
I'll let you know what happens.
Yeah,
if I'm still
I'd be
around.
interested to hear about that but just the rule of thumb is everything just gets passed on to the next.
Okay.
Onto the estate of, and whoever's going to take that on.
So let's talk about wraps quickly, because wraps have been a popular thing, especially now with where interest rates are at, and very attractive in terms of just creating, quote, passive income.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the downside risks to doing wraps? And let me paint the picture just to give the context. When we're talking about a wrap, we're buying on creative finance. So we're buying on a subject to or a seller finance, right? And then we are selling on a seller finance at a higher interest rate. And then we make the delta of the spread of the monthly payment plus the delta of the down payment when we sell it, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the downside risks?
Well, the downside of it becomes if you have a sub 2 and you're, on your sub 2, like you have to be able to set aside if or when they stop paying, right? So that's always got to be the number one concern. But that also has to come into play of your screening process to your end buyer. It's just like leasing to tenants, right? You don't lease just to anybody just because somebody has a heartbeat and somebody has some cash on them today. So the better you screen, the less likelihood that you have the chance of the default happening. But yeah, the downfalls of that are, number one, I mean, are you going to have reserves set aside? So if they stop making payments, do you have enough to cover the underlying
right
for those 6 to 8 months that it might take you to have to take them through a foreclosure process, right? And again, are we talking contract for deed? Are you transferring title? Again, there's two different things so can you take them through a judicial or you have to go through a non-judicial foreclosure?
Yeah.
That process. But nonetheless, it's still a foreclosure process and it's going to take time.
Right.
So when that happens, you have to have that underlying serviced and maintained for that period of time. So you might be 8, 10, maybe even sometimes 12 months. I mean, Idaho, if you serve them right, do it correctly, it should only take you, 4 to 6 months.
Yeah. And the way that on the sale of the property that I can maybe de-risk things a little bit more is obviously the higher the down payment that I'm getting.
Right.
Right. So what are some things that you look for when you're evaluating a deal, a creative finance deal on, am I going to hold this as a rental? Am I going to wrap it? What's kind of your criteria?
Yeah. For me, as I get to this phase, I'm looking more to get away from the rental side of things.
Yep.
I'm looking to actually convert more to actually wraps or actually seller financing. I think one, just because there's a huge need for seller financing, more than there has been in probably the last 10 to 12 years, maybe even longer.
Yeah. Just
because there are so many people being priced out. And where the beauty about the wrap side of things is if you can come in and take over an existing mortgage at 3% and you can turn around and sell somebody at 6%, you're still under market, and you're still giving somebody a really good deal. And that 6 versus the 7.5%, 8%, 9% is a huge shift in affordability.
Millions and millions of people. I think I saw something a couple years ago that said roughly 30% of all Americans can't qualify for a home mortgage. And that was when we had record low interest rates. Yeah. So think about now, we've more than doubled where we were at.
Wait, what was it? Because we haven't seen a huge reduction in prices, right? So we've gone from 3% now up to, at one point, it was close to 8%.
Yeah.
And that change in income was almost 60%. So the same house at a different rate at virtually the same price, you had to have almost 60% higher income to qualify.
Insane.
So that immediately wipes out, probably 80% of the people that need to be able to buy. So there's such a huge demand for seller financing for people like us, and provide that opportunity for people that are, because a lot of these people, what we call them, are penalty box buyers. They're people that are self-employed, that don't take a wage. They just take a draw off their income. They're contractors, they're 1099 employees, but they make, a lot of these guys, right now, some of them are making well over 6 figures.
Yes.
Right. They're gross. They're having huge sales, but they don't show a W-2 wage, so they can't get qualified. And their credit's not terrible. It's probably in the low 6s, mid to low 6s, somewhere around there. So they're not bad. And these are great people, and they're wanting to own. And they just can't, they can get qualified in one way or another. And so those are great people to step in and provide that service for them.
And I think it can't be understated. There are so many people out there that fit in this criteria.
Yeah.
There's so many. We had a wrap in Meridian. That's a pretty nice place in a great neighborhood. And I had the thing on Zillow for sale by owner like 2 days. And I found someone that was willing to put $90K down at like 7.5% interest.
Yeah.
I mean, right away.
Yeah.
There are so many people like that out there.
Yep, there are, because they're looking, and again, like there's a lot of people out there that just don't want to have to deal with banks because the process is so arduous. It's terrible and it's painful. I actually just saw some post of a buddy of mine who's just on the investment side. He's trying to get a refi done and he's at like 45% loan to value and they can't get him. And they're finding more conditions to come up that he needs to provide for. And they're in 2 months. I just got done doing one on a triplex down in the Magic Valley, refinanced. And it took my lender 4 months to get it done. And they brought up all these individual, and they kept bringing conditions. And come to find out that the one lender they were using wasn't licensed in Idaho, but they weren't telling me that. It's just the point is that it's crap like that really deter people away from wanting to go. And frankly, a lot of people don't trust banks.
Yeah.
And they'd rather deal face to face with somebody that they know is real, somebody's legit. And so that demand is huge. And there's people with cash like that sitting out there that you wouldn't even know.
Yeah.
They're looking for that opportunity because all they want to do is just have a home for their family and they don't want to rent.
Yeah. So when you're getting a sub-2 or seller finance under contract and you decide, okay, I'm going to wrap this, are you designing the note criteria to be most advantageous to sell in the future, or are you thinking more about how do I get more of a down payment or more security now?
Sure.
How do you weigh those?
I think it's best just to position it and have the best quality paper possible. So that's having all the underwriting criteria met. So what you want is you want to have your borrower qualified. So it's having an RMLO done, service done. So you qualify for the Dodd-Frank rules and laws. So you get RMLO service done. You have credit score on there. You have a down payment. And typically you want to see at least 10%, if not more. So they got some skin in the game, but if you can get anything north of that, that's great. So credit, down payment. And then obviously is the collateral good, right? Are you selling them something that's just like 4 walls and a roof that's like a shanty? Or, I mean, is it like in a solid, nice neighborhood?
Right.
And obviously seasoning over time, that's the 6th component that really makes really good quality paper. That's what we're structuring it that way, with the idea that, I want to keep as much as I can, but you just never know. Down the line, if I want to, I won't have as much of an issue trying to sell it. The problem is where if you just turn around and do a wrap and you just throw in whoever, has a heartbeat, has no money down and has terrible credit, and you're moving them into a crappy neighborhood or a bad house, bad area. When you have all these other conditions working against you, it's going to deteriorate the quality of your paper or what somebody's willing to pay.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing that I've seen in some of these platforms where they're selling this paper and it's not even 1 month seasoning. And they've got 0 down payment. They've got a low equity deal.
Super high risk.
And they're wanting par, or they're wanting the value of the note. It's like, well, I'll give you 50 cents.
Right.
So that's just the nature of the game, because any note buyer's goal is to buy at a discount. Wherever that discount is, they're always going to buy at a discount. Just like us, when we're buying property, we want to buy at a discount.
Of course. Yeah.
So it's no different.
What's like the lowest delta you would take in a down payment? Let's say my purchase funds in are $30K to the seller all in when I'm doing a creative finance deal. I've decided I'm going to wrap it. What's like the minimum now that I need to get from an end buyer to make myself feel protected?
Well, I think, like I said, 10% is kind of the number.
Okay.
10%, just because, and it's not so much my comfort level, they have skin in the game now.
Yeah.
And so if we're selling a $350,000 or $400,000 deal, you're talking anywhere between 35 to 40 grand. Yeah. They're gonna have to fall on some pretty hard times to step out on that thing.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, and then if you leave room where there's an opportunity for them to kind of do improvements, then you see them putting in improvements on the property. Now they have even more skin in the game. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking at this market, at this level, 10% is kind of where, now I'm saying that's an end all be all, but that's kind of where the threshold is. 5%, no way. There's some things you can do to structure. Let's say you got a property that's a fixer upper, right? Where you've bought it at a pretty significant discount and you're selling at below market value with the idea somebody can kind of come in and put some money into it. Now, I'd be willing to take less down, but I'm going to structure things, probably do like an 80-20 deal or a 90-10 deal where I'm going to give them a renovation, a note on a certain amount.
Oh, interesting.
That offsets their down payment. But once those improvements are done, that they show me, okay, hey, look, I've gone in and put $20,000 and put in a new kitchen, new flooring, new paint. Boom, I've increased the value of the property by $40,000. Then we can go remove that 10% note, whether it's a $20,000 note, which would have been their down payment money. Now that comes off because they put it into the property. And so now they've got sweat and equity in skin, but I've had the leverage there to protect my interest if things went the other way.
Dude, isn't creative finance the best?
So I'm telling you, man.
Just any of these little things, you can make a really, really solid deal out of nothing.
Well, yeah, and that's just on the selling side. You're limited a little bit on the selling side.
Sure.
Right. On the buying, on the acquisition side is what's fun.
Yeah.
Because there's literally, there's literally no limit. And the best way to explain it is like, there's no parameters to how a deal needs to be structured. The deal is structured based off of the conversation between you and the seller. And that's it. There's nothing stating like, well, it has to be this, it has to be this, and it has to be this, and it has to be this. That's what's so cool about getting in these conversations. And you've experienced it with these sellers.
Yeah.
Well, tell me how you guys work and tell me what you guys are offering. Well, it's like, hey, tell me what you need. And then let's figure out how we can carve this thing up to make sense for you and make sense for us.
Yeah.
And then typically what we do after we have that long conversation, it usually takes 2 or 3 phone calls. Then we come back with 3 different options for them that are all completely different, but they're striking an emotional anchor point to each one.
Right.
That now, hey, it's just a matter of
one's got the highest price, one's got the highest down payment, one's got the highest monthly payment, something to that effect.
Well, we already have the price. We already know what the price is.
Got it. Because that's usually what would steer them towards a creative finance deal is like, if I can come up to your number, I'm checking that box.
Yep. So the price has been talked about. Now we're talking about all the other components of their needs that they need underneath that. I mean, do you need money now? How much do you need now? And then talk about their time frame, age plays a factor and all that stuff. But basically, once we have the price set, we know what we're going to be paying for it. Then we can go assess, okay, if we're going to pay this much, and then based off the other things that it may need, renovation, whatever else, or what our exit is, then we'll give them 2 or 3 options. Here's 2 or 3 options for you to consider based off this price. And that's from cash down to terms to time. And then we carve it up from there.
Something that we're doing a lot of lately, again, there's levels to this, and I wish I knew about it. But any of our sellers that agree to sell on 0% interest, either as a straight up seller finance or like a seller second position, a piggyback second, we're getting a substitution of collateral. So we're putting that against another property in second position, like a rental. And then we're able to free up that property to be sold, getting all that liquidity. And then we've still got the 0% note that we're paying off monthly on another property, but then we can flip it and get all that cash.
That's another one of those baked in terms that just becomes so powerful. Maybe not today, but down the line.
Yes.
When you realize, because you may buy a property it's a large lot, and from a zoning standpoint, it may not work, but just like what Boise had recently with all their zoning changes, all of a sudden now this property meets this criteria that, oh, hey, the substitution of collateral. Now we got a free and clear lot that we can either sell, we can build, we can develop, we can do whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's powerful.
Love it. What's something unique to Idaho in the creative finance space that's maybe an added challenge? I know we mentioned cash flow is tough, so that's why wraps become more of a play. But there's not many people doing it, and it seems maybe a little more taboo.
It's becoming more niche now. It's just because I think agents have caught on to it because they're working with sellers that need to sell, and so they're more in tune. I think it's becoming easier than it has been. What have you seen as your challenges?
I mean, you're like the only person that I knew that was doing creative finance in Idaho. So that's kind of why I brought it up. I know Idaho's a volatile market. That's clearly reflected by what happened in the last crash, but also has an immense amount of upside. And to me, maybe selfishly, I look at this opportunity in Idaho and I'm like, there's just not a lot of people doing it here yet.
Yeah, I can't speak to how many people are not doing it. I think the one thing that makes Idaho unique, and maybe there's security in this, is that coming off of the pandemic and the wave of mass exodus in all these other areas of people moving here, you see the same thing happening in Florida.
Yeah.
You see the same thing happening in Arizona and Texas. We're kind of discovered now. So I think there is security in that, at least for the future here on the horizon, on the short horizon. It's going to be a great market to invest in as far as building equity over time. It's going to continue to grow. Now, where's that tipping point? I thought the pandemic was a tipping point, was going to send us into a crash because we'd already gone well beyond the market cycle. But I think with Boise being put on the map, the Treasure Valley in Idaho alone, in and of itself being put on the map, there's still a lot of people coming. And you see businesses coming here now. I mean, like sustainable businesses, not just call centers. That was the biggest thing, in 05 and 06. It was a lot of call center, lower income type of positions. But now you have headquarters being moved here. You see what Micron's doing.
Yeah.
It's not just a valley that is solely built up off of real estate. There's a lot of industry coming here now. Yeah. And with the development of to be able to work from home and the remote stuff, that plays into a lot of people's lifestyle who moved out of the W-2 job and went into something independent and have created their own thing and developed a lifestyle of financial freedom, mentality, and gone off on their own journey and have moved here or somewhere like that. So I think there's all those components, at least in the distant future. There's still a lot of strong opportunity here. And right now, with rates where they are, I mean, the creative way is certainly a great opportunity to step into that.
What's the craziest deal you've ever done? When you got a bag of crazies, it's tough to pick one. I know.
Yeah, there's one we did up in Idaho City a few years back when I very first started learning the creative space. That was pretty cool, but I ended up wholesaling that one off.
Okay.
So I didn't get to see the benefit of it. But I'll just do the one that we just did down in the Magic Valley here recently. It's a country property out. It's on 5 acres. So it was going into foreclosure.
Okay.
And the story behind this is crazy. So we ended up getting in contact with one of the 3 owners.
Okay.
So there's 3 owners on title. We get in contact with one of them. He's an over-the-road trucker. Property's going into foreclosure like literally within like 2 weeks.
Okay.
So the house is worth about $400,000. They only owe like $105,000.
Wow. So a lot of equity.
Ton of equity. But they're 2 years behind. So we come in and we get an agreement in place in principle, right?
Okay.
Just enough to satisfy them. And then so I reinstate the loan.
Okay. Prior to close.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I knew that we had them.
Yep.
I mean, I knew we had a deal, or else
Sure.
I wouldn't have done it. We got the loan reinstated to be able to go through this. So what we ended up negotiating, I paid a lot more than I probably needed to, right? This is a cool thing about creative, about the ability to overpay. So property's worth about $375 to $400. We paid $500 for it.
You paid $100,000 more than the property is worth.
Correct. Yeah. So we paid $100,000 over value today, but one of the 3 owners had passed away, which was the ex-wife of one of the owners and the current wife, the widow of the other. Yeah. They're both on title, but the one who was his ex-wife, he was over in, he has Parkinson's or something like that. So he was in a living facility just across the way, but they were still connected. And at one point we're all living together. It was just a weird deal. But what I ended up negotiating on this deal was, so I got them to subordinate. We came in and paid off the first with a private lender. They subordinated. And then one of them deferred payments for 24 months. The other one deferred payments for 5 years. We gave one $10K at closing. We gave the other one $30K at closing, which was all paid for by my private lender.
Yep.
So I didn't bring any money to this. And then we went in and renovated the property, and now we've got it up and performing. And I think the rates we have we did a step rate.
Okay. Yep.
So on the one we deferred for 2 years, we started out at 0%, and then we step up to 4%.
Okay.
We balloon in 10. And the other one we deferred for 5 years. Same thing. We had 3 step ups. I think we go from 0 to like 2.5 to 4, and I think we do the last one at like 6. But it's for like 25 years.
Okay.
So that one I know I'm buying back.
Yep.
So we have a $110,000 note with him, and we have another $105,000 note with the other guy. Both of them I know that we're going to buy back at a discount because of how long that we've put it over time. And then we ended up renovating that. It's now a rental for the time being. Because of the price I purchased it, I'm just waiting for the value to come up.
Yep.
And then at that point, once we have the equity and the value there, and whether that's through us buying the note back or the market going up, then we'll turn around and we'll sell it on a wrap.
Okay. So you added like 3 to 4 different bells and whistles on one. You put a lot of toppings on that creative pizza. I love that. And the wheels were spinning as you were talking about that. It's like you can make any kind of situation into a deal. When you're saying we're going to buy that note back, is that something that in 5 years from now you will contact them and say, hey, or do you wait for them to contact you?
Just knowing the situations that they're in,
Yeah.
that at some point it's going to come around. I mean, we structured a 25-year note
Right.
with one of them. Like, there's no way that's going to see maturity.
Right.
And if it does, that's great, because that means we'll have made a ton of money on the thing. And will we own that property for 25 years? Probably not. Any seller finance note, or actually any loan that's made, the percentage of those going beyond 7 years, because most people either sell or refinance within 5 to 7 years. So the likelihood of that going a full 25 years is very, very low. Our odds are very good of us buying that note back at some point. The other one, again, we just given the situations in his life and just what you experienced, we'll end up buying that note back as well. I'm pretty sure.
Man, I love that. I love that. So for those in the audience, maybe they're just getting started in creative finance. You and I were talking off camera about, we see some of these deals and contracts lately. Maybe they have 1 or 2 sentences about what's about to happen, which is weird to me because they're getting the information from somewhere and I guess they're just not reaching out to a coach or a mentor or somebody that's actually been doing it. Or maybe they did reach out to somebody that's providing them not good intel. What should those people do?
As far as getting started, number one, learn from somebody, go to somebody that is seasoned. It's got some salt and pepper on them. If you've been in this game for 5 years is not very long in this game.
No.
10 years is you're still somewhat of an infant because you really haven't seen a full cycle. And I'm not saying that people that have been in the game for a small amount of time, that 5 years or 10 years, don't disregard that. But what I would encourage you to do is, if there are people out there teaching a certain technique, find out how long that they've been doing it, and are they active doing it?
Right.
Because the market's always changing. And then find out who they learned from, because that was a big thing for me. The 2 people that I've had the most success with as far as mentorship and teachers, they were both people that had been in the industry for 35 plus years and are still active in the business. So they're people that saw like Reaganomics.
Right.
So they're people that saw like 18% interest rates. And so when you have conversations with them about that, because it's similar to how people felt when they went from 3 to 8, right? It was just like blood in the streets kind of mentality, like, oh my God. And they're just like,
yeah.
I mean, but the perspective of that, and it's just understanding, because they've seen things, people that have done thousands of deals.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't get any better, education and wisdom from that. But so that would be one thing. If you're going to get education from somebody, that would be the first thing I would say, is like, anchor to somebody that is actively doing it, or learn from somebody that has done it for a long period of time. The third piece of it is make sure your paperwork's solid. Even if you buy some paperwork from a mentor, take it to your local attorney, get it vetted, have it gone through.
Yeah.
Because that's oftentimes what I see a lot of people I talk with is like, well, I just got this from so-and-so and I'm just putting it to work. Did you take it to a local attorney?
Right.
Well, no, where are they doing business? He's in Tennessee. It's like, yeah, well, Tennessee is way different. Or it's in Ohio. Like, Ohio is way different than Idaho.
Yeah. I think too, if you don't know, there's many attorneys that don't know how this stuff works. And so that's where you have to know somebody that's been doing it in the space to give you the right attorney. I remember when I was getting started in this, I would just cold call attorneys, or I'd ask other people that weren't doing creative finance deals, because there weren't many people in Idaho doing it, for their attorney referral. And when I got on the phone with them, they would charge me like $200 and not know what the heck I was talking about. So you have to find somebody in the space that's doing it.
Yeah, it's crucial, because it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And if you're somebody that's just going to do, hey, I'm just going to do like a couple and call it good, then yeah, your likelihood is very, very low. But if you're somebody that's trying to build and do something, like, just save yourself the time and headache, and just invest in your business and invest in yourself in this, because those safeguards are going to protect you down the line, because you're going to screw up. Just accept the fact that you're going to suck at this at first, and you're going to screw up, and you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to structure it wrong your first couple times, or you're going to miss a thing here, miss a thing there. It's going to happen. But you want to make sure that your paperwork's solid, so that from a liability standpoint, you're not going to come back and get hammered.
100%. And that's where the people that have the experience and have seen everything comes into play, because as different weird stuff in the world happens and different financial conditions change, the risk barometer on certain strategies goes way up or way down. That's why we're saying this, because it's not this pie in the sky, like, oh, you need to go find somebody because they'll tell you what to do or try to sell you their program. No, it's because that they've seen every single type of market that there is and what strategy has the least amount of risk and most amount of upside in each cycle.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's just a tool in a tool belt.
Right.
It's not the end all be all. What really drew me to the creative side was when it was being presented at the time when I stepped in to get this education it was right in the midst of when the market was just going bonkers. His approach was, look, your average wholesale deal or your average deal that you're picking up in your business is about 1 in 20 to 1 in 30.
Yep.
What if I could show you a way that you could pick up 1 to 2 extra deals inside of those 20 or 30 that you're already throwing away?
Bam. Yeah.
I was like, okay. And then that's what sold me on that. Like, yeah, if I can increase my conversions by that much, yeah, I'm sold. And so we stepped into that. And once I saw what was the possibilities of it. And again, there's a season because in like early 19, it was tough from like 20 to 22.
Oh, dude, it was so hard to get creative deals because everybody was getting cash way over asking price, right?
Yeah.
And so that pitch it was hard.
Yeah. So, I mean, the season for it wasn't quite there. So we really didn't have a ton of success with it. And then we saw a big uptick once things shifted because people realized, hey, we can't sell. We're not getting market price. We can't sell in 3 or 4 days like we used to, but I still want my price. Okay.
There you go.
Here we go.
I love it. Well, I could talk to you about this stuff for hours, man. We'll have to have you back and maybe deep dive specifics about notes and note investing. But for those that want to learn more about you, learn more about creative finance, how do they get in touch with you?
You can just go to my personal Facebook page. I don't do any social media stuff. We're on there, Idaho House Buyer. So you can message us there, or you can message me on my personal account, Dan Walters, on Facebook. I got an account on Instagram and all that stuff, but I probably should be on there. That would probably be the best. And then we can drop maybe in the show notes, like email or something like that they can hit me up at.
Absolutely, man. Anything you want to leave the listeners with?
I would just say, if you have, wherever you are in this, just keep going. Because like it's easy to get discouraged in this business, especially if you're just trying to get started or you're on your own or you're trying to scale up. But just know that like continual forward movement, you'll reap the benefits of it 3 to 4 years down the line right now. Because what you're doing today is going to sow the seeds in the next 90, 120 to 60 months from now.
Yeah. 100%. And there's so many deals out there too. I'm just amazed at like how much opportunity there is because our marketing has increased. And so now I see how many deals we miss.
Yeah. The one thing that I always tell people that say, well, God, it's just so hard to find a deal right now. And I just go, look, go down to your local title company and just go sit there and watch how many people are coming in and out. There are deals being done right now, today, as we speak in this conversation. There are multiple deals being closed right here in the Valley.
Yep.
So like, there are deals out there. It's just a matter of make sure you're getting out there and engaging with those people that do it. And like I said, the 3 action items that I always go by to be productive: if you're not talking to sellers, if you're not talking to buyers, and if you're not writing offers, then you have no chance.
Yeah.
Those are the only 3 things that make you money in this business. So those are the only 3 things you need to focus on. If you do those 3 things, you're going to be successful.
Love it, man. Well, let's end it there. That's a wrap on this one. We'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.